Hey guys, my name is Blair Kim, and I am the podcast host for a podcast called When I Grew Up. And today I'm here with my friend David, who actually I feel like is somewhat of a mentor to me in the podcast world. But hey, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast, David Shin, your
Oh,
podcast. I hope they hear this.
thank
Welcome.
you. I've never been welcomed to this podcast before, so feels different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to be here. So you guys, David, this is your 100th podcast episode.
Yes.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, from one, I'm a amateur podcaster. I'm only on like episode 37 or something. But um I like I would imagine it feels like you did something, no? Like, don't you feel like, man, 100 episodes?
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know if I ever had the goal of getting to 100. But being here, it's like, whoa, like I have been podcasting, huh? Like there's like something I've done. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I want to talk about that a little bit more, but so to be honest, you guys, I'm not entirely sure, how I wanted to talk about things during this episode, but David mentioned to me that he just wanted to do something different for his 100th episode. So, I feel like we should maybe talk about podcasting in general, and then whatever comes up along the way, we'll just chat. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I love it. I
Okay.
love it.
So, question number one, David.
Mhm.
Um, there are I mean, podcasting is a lot of fun, I feel like, but there are challenges that come with podcasting. Have you felt that in any way, or what are some of the things that you feel like have been challenging in this journey of podcasting?
Yeah. So I mentioned this to Blair right before we started recording, but I feel like people who are really close to me, they listen to my podcast and think, "Oh, that David seems a little bit different." And I think I would imagine because I feel myself actively filtering myself a lot.
Mm,
When we talk about certain things, I oftentimes I have kind of unpopular opinions, and I think that just comes from a very curious place. I'm curious about a lot of things,
mhm,
so when
mhm,
I think through certain things, I get to a point where I think, oh, like other people wouldn't appreciate me maybe thinking this way, but I'm like afraid to ask people like, hey, like this is the way I'm thinking. Like, what do you think? To be honest, I'm kind of afraid to actually put that out there to people. So, because I am that way when I do podcasts, I find myself restraining myself from getting to areas that people might consider kind of unpopular. People tell me that they enjoy the I hope they hear this podcast because a lot of times it's raw and vulnerable, but all of that 100% comes from my guests. Like
mhm,
I don't think that's really supplied by me because I'm not super raw and vulnerable,
mhm.
but I made the decision to be today. So maybe people will see a truer side of me today.
No,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so that it's a little difficult because of that. I'm constantly thinking about, am I don't really care too much about my own image, but when a guest is on, I want to make absolutely sure that I'm not tarnishing their image in any way. So there have been instances where I would edit out small clips because I see the potential of it being misinterpreted. So those things are I think the most difficult. Always being
Mm.
on alert and on guard. Yeah.
Interesting. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you sometimes edit out small clips in order to either protect your guest or protect maybe even yourself
Hmm.
too
Hmm.
from offending people. Um, the reason I say that is because, that podcast itself is called I Hope They Hear This.
Hmm.
And for those that don't know, could you explain why you even named it that?
Yeah, it started out as I want people to hear things that normally they wouldn't hear. So I wanted to be able to reach an audience that I found unreachable, or maybe I don't know. There's something where I feel like I need to get this message across to a certain people group or a certain person or something like that. But it kind of morphed into what I'm trying to do nowadays is more of I want people to hear this Asian American experience, right?
Mm.
There are a lot of I guess it's relevant now, but there are a lot of things that happen to the Asian American community that kind of gets swept under the rug, right? So I feel like our stories and our perspectives and our thoughts aren't really put on display as much as other people's. So yeah, it's kind of morphed into I hope they hear pretty much our Asian American experience and story.
Wow, I didn't know that in your head that it had evolved like
Oh
that.
yeah. Hmm.
For me, I love the genesis of it all, where you just wanted a platform for people to share their raw thoughts.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the reason I find it a little bit ironic is because that was the intent in the
Hmm.
beginning, for you to be raw and for your guests to be raw too. And I always encourage people, hey, my podcast is about careers, and we try to stay on topic, with a few, personal stories intertwined. But I always tell people, hey, if you want to hear some really just like honest conversation, like go listen to I Hope They Hear This. But all that to say, David, I feel like you do a great job of facilitating conversation.
Mm, oh, thank you.
um yeah, I mean, for me, that's kind of challenging at times, because like like if I'm honest, oh man, this is so vulnerable right now,
Mm.
and transparent. Like sometimes I find it hard to like stay engaged, especially virtually.
Mm.
Like stay engaged and like say words to like make the guest know that I'm listening to them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm
I know what you
talking
mean. I
about?
know what you mean. Yeah.
Um, but anyways, that's besides the point. But you're so good at that. I feel like you're so good on staying on topic, and also um kind of transitioning into the next
Mhm.
part. You guys, you don't know. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
No,
Well,
but so
uh-huh.
I think so initially, like if you listen to my first few episodes where it's just me by myself, I
Hmm.
think I am pretty raw and unfiltered.
Mm.
But the idea that I have to kind of protect people only really came about when I started having guests. Like I just I didn't want there was an episode I did with Sarah Pack, and there was something about her career that she said, and she didn't mind saying it. She didn't care that it was in there. But after we recorded, I texted her and said, "Hey, like there's that little part where you mentioned this thing, and I know that the chances of anybody at your company listening to this is like practically zero, but I just want to protect you from, you know, someone at your company interpreting that in the wrong way. So I'm just going to edit that part out." And yeah, it's only because I don't want because every guest that comes on my podcast, and I'm sure you can relate to this. Every guest who comes on, they're doing us a favor, right?
Hmm.
They're taking time out of their day. They're sharing their stories with us, and I don't want to repay that favor by causing some sort of negative impact to their lives.
Sure, absolutely.
So yeah, and I think I tend to kind of what's the word, dramatize, or maybe even I take it to like all these thoughts. I take it to the worst like place, worst possible scenario. Like I see, like for example, if I mess up at work, even if it's something minor, my mind immediately goes to how can this snowball into me eventually getting fired, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like that's the kind of like way that I think. It's really unhealthy, and it's like yeah, it's not a good way to think, but it's just kind of how I'm wired. So because I'm that way, like any little inkling of possibly hurting my guests, like I need to shield them from that because anybody who comes on my podcast is like such a valuable like guest of mine. Like they're doing me a huge favor. They're buying into the mission and vision of the podcast. Like it's in so many ways it's an honor to have these people on the podcast, right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely resonate with that. And I guess like I do that unknowingly. Like
Mm.
I try to I guess I do censor sometimes what I say or even what I ask
Yeah.
because like like I want to know the juicy stuff too of their jobs and
Yeah.
like what what's really going on and but same what you just said wanting to they still have to go back to work
Hmm.
and just in case someone hears it but at the same time David like don't you think the guest has like their own responsibility by even coming on, knowing that their life is going to be public in this next hour that you're interviewing them? What do you think about that?
No, yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree with that. And actually, I want to ask you this. Do you do this thing? Before every recording, I ask them, hey, is there any topic that you don't want to talk about? Because I'm going to make sure we clear steer of that topic. Do you do that?
Yes, I do ask them, and then I say, and they usually say like, "Oh no, everything is fine. I'm an open book."
Yeah.
But I, full disclosure, I actually say, "Hey, if I do bring something up that you don't feel comfortable talking about, just say, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. No harm, no foul, you know."
Hmm.
Um, what about you? So you do that?
I say exactly that. I even say if we get into a subject area that you're not comfortable with, tell me and I can edit it out so that even the mention of that gets removed. I haven't had to do that yet
Mm-hmm,
on a large scale like that. I think I've only edited things out twice, and it was like really little bits of
hmm
it. Um, but yeah, I agree that they need to be responsible, and I know that they're aware that this is a public platform that anybody who wants to listen can listen.
hmm
But I don't know. I think I have a protective side of me where I don't know.
No, yeah, I think that's honestly, David, it's honorable and respectable. I think that's why people trust you, to
Mm,
come on your podcast and be as transparent and vulnerable and raw,
mm,
as you ask them to be. So it's
mm,
really great. I think it's really great.
yeah.
Yeah, man. So you were saying like you've been going into kind of sharing the Asian American experience
Mm,
for those that don't know or haven't been exposed and also even just for our community in itself to hear the stories
yep.
and where people have been I think has been so great and but you mentioned that culturally I think things have shifted a little bit I don't know if it's like in the last year, right, that includes a time during the pandemic where people are starting to notice the Asian
Hmm.
American experience. And
Hmm.
also, I think, a voice is being raised. And I mean, that new movie, I think it comes out
Yes.
soon.
Minari.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to even, I had even like random people that are not Asian American from like high school, like like my like history, right?
Hmm.
That I don't even talk to anymore, like message me and text me like, hey, like, did you see that this movie is coming out? Because I've like talked to him about it. Like one example is like my old skating coach texted me, right? And like, hey, did you
Mm.
see this? And so it's like interesting, right, to
Hmm.
hear and see how culture is shifting and how I mean, I feel, your podcast is like right on point,
Mm.
with how culture and society is learning
Hmm.
about the Asian American experience. But then, sorry, I'm on a tangent right now,
No,
but
no.
um
I love it.
like David and I, my husband, we were talking about like, do I know really what the Asian American experience really is? And the reason we're talking about it, David, is because of your most recent episode. I don't know when this episode is airing. I'm
Hmm.
sorry, y'all, but um, with Pastor David Park.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It'll be 2 episodes ago, but yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that podcast in itself spurred on conversation that we've been talking about this for days, like your podcast with him.
Hmm.
And I just want to say and encourage you, David, like yeah, I mean, and even in my own household, your podcast and this platform is bringing up conversation that I don't think we would ever talk about if we didn't listen to it.
Oh, wow.
So amazing job, man.
Hopefully they're
100%.
good conversations and
No,
not.
yeah, I mean, like, they're just, I mean, just, they are good conversations, but conversations that we just would never, I think, bring up
Mm,
if someone didn't even present it to us.
mm,
Or, especially, because we're so busy with the kids these days, we don't have actually like intellectual conversations right
yeah.
at this moment in our lives.
Yeah.
So it's been cool. It's been cool to hear and listen to your podcast.
Wow.
Um, but anyways,
Mm.
enough about what my life has been like. I want to hear about yours, sir. So um, do you feel like this podcast has changed you as a person in the last 100 episodes?
Hmm. I think it has. One major thing is, the whole stigma of mental health that Asian Americans, even for like second generation like us, I think it's changing a lot. I think it's shifting, but I think we still have this sense of if we can't manage our own like mentality, then you can't manage those things around you, right? So like it's a sign of strength to be mentally put together, and therefore there's a stigma around seeking mental health help, right?
Mm.
So that was I was pretty, similar in thought process and mindset coming into the podcast, right? But in talking with different people, I've had several episodes about like anxiety and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think talking to people who were open and vulnerable about going to therapy and all those things, it really helped destigmatize it for myself as well. So like I've been seeing a counselor or a therapist as well. And yeah, it's life changing, yeah, with anxiety, especially during the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
lockdown, my anxiety got kicked into high gear. And, it was uh, just, it wasn't fun living. You know what I mean? Like there's a constant pressure of this anxiety that's coming from somewhere. And, like I wanted to quit work, I wanted to, I even went as far as thinking there might be value in my life ending because of the life insurance money that would go to my family. Like I don't think I ever got to the point of I'm actually gonna commit suicide or anything like that. But my mind did go to a place where I was exploring, what is the actual impact to those around me if my life were to end, not necessarily caused by me, but like I thought about those things, and it was triggered by this anxiety that I was going through. And um, I think because of my Korean American background and the culture that we are from, I put myself in a place where I was thinking, you know, everyone goes through this. Everyone has to work. Everyone has pressures in their lives, and everyone else is doing fine. So I should be able to get myself to a place where I can be fine too. Like I don't need to go seek help. I don't need to do other things um, to get used to this maybe, or to get over this. But the podcast, in talking with several people, I mean, shout outs to Selena, because I actually got referred from her. So yeah, like I've been going to these sessions. It's been great. I feel a lot better now. I feel like I know myself a lot better. And yeah, anxiety is like manageable now. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge thing that's changed. But in terms of like personality, I don't think so. I think I've always been kind of curious. I've always been kind of interviewing people, just not on the podcast. And whenever I found someone interesting, I would sit down with them and, hey, like, so why do you do this? Like, oh, how does that make you feel? Like, I was always a little bit that way. So, I don't know if that's changed all that much. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing what you said about, yeah, finding mental help
Mm,
for your mental health.
mm.
And so, you said that your anxiety that you were experiencing before has been, um, you're able to manage it better now. So, does the therapist and counselor that you see give you tools to be able to do that?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest issue was that I didn't know where my anxiety was coming from.
Mm,
So it's this, right? Like if you just look at my life at a surface level, like it's great. married to a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful daughter. My parents are healthy; they're doing great. In laws are doing well. I have a good job. You know, securely in middle class. There's nothing on the surface level
Mm.
that should have indicated that I would have any sort of anxiety. So I even wrote like a short story on this on my website, where this guy, like I kind of, um, so the way that I wrote it is there's a guy and he's like desperate to figure out where the source of his anxiety is coming from, and there's an entity that says, okay, I can show you, but like, are you sure you want to know? And he says yes, and he opens the door to the source of his anxiety, but there's nothing in the room, and then that breaks him even more. So that's the kind of place that I was in. I was in a place where I was
Yikes,
thinking,
David. That's intense. Yes,
yeah, yeah.
keep going.
So I was in the place of I have this anxiety, but there's no reason why I should have this anxiety. So I don't know how to fix it.
Mm,
But what happens in therapy is where we get to talk through it, and I get to like I found out where the anxiety was coming from. There were things that I knew in my head, but I had never connected it together to be able to say, oh, like this is why I'm anxious. Like I think this way, and I took this to a unreasonable and irrational place, and that's why I'm having all this anxiety. So the fact that I can identify it clearer and um, kind of, and it's helpful to hear things like when I say things, it's helpful to hear someone say, wait, why do you think that way? That sounds really irrational. Like, I messed up at work yesterday, and I feel like my manager is going to be really mad and try to fire me.
mm,
Then she'll say, why do you think that way? Like, are you that bad at your job that you're constantly being, scrutinized or scolded, or like they don't like the work that you do? And I'm like, no, I'm usually I do good work. And then she'll say, then why would this one mistake alone like warrants a firing? So like, there's a kind of a more reasonable voice that's helping me process the things that I'm going through. And then I get to a place of, oh yeah, that is really unreasonable to think that way, to turn everything into a doomsday scenario.
mm,
And so being able to do that, now I can do that myself, right? When something happens that starts to spark my anxiety, like I can really sit down and think through it a little bit more rationally
mm.
to say, well, is this reasonable? Is this a reasonable response I'm having, or has my mind just kind of taken it to a crazy place?
Right,
Yeah,
right. Man, I should see a therapist or a
yeah.
counselor. No, only
I
because like I think you're right. There is this un I can't even explain it, right? Like no one taught me going to a therapist or seeking mental help is a bad thing. No one said that. But
mhm.
for some reason, there is this like almost sense of pride,
Yeah.
like that comes with it. It's like, oh, I'm fine. Everything
Mhm.
is good, right? But even I don't experience the same types of anxiety that you do. So I can't completely relate. However, of course there's worry in my life,
Yeah.
right? That needs to be worked out, and I'm sure a lot of people would benefit, but I do feel, again, full disclosure, like there is this sense of pride, like, oh, I mean, like how can another person help me with the things that, you know,
Mm.
I think are my problems, or I can handle it myself. And I don't think it's only Asian Americans. I think
Yeah.
in general, like there is that sense of, oh, well, I don't need someone else to tell me this, or if you go, like, you're crazy or something,
Mm.
something like that. But um, to me, going is the opposite of crazy. It's sane,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's amazing, David. That's really awesome. I would imagine too has a positive effect on your family as well.
Yeah. I think so. Well, I don't know. You would have to ask Shirley. I don't know if she. I don't know because again, I feel like I'm really filtered on when I need to be. So I
Sure.
don't know how much of all of this I was going through was apparent to Shirley. Because
Mm.
I mean, I would have conversations with her. I would let her know, but I don't think I really, let her know the level of it,
Mm.
because I wanted to shield her from, because I don't want her to think, oh, is this because he married me, or like, am I doing something wrong that's causing, like,
Wow, David, really? I'm surprised because yeah, you're right. I guess I just didn't imagine the David Shin that I know
mhm.
to go to those darker
Oh
places.
yeah, I go to a lot of dark places. Like
But
it's
if I think about it, like your job anticipates the dark places for other companies. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like your job is to protect companies from these doomsday situations.
yeah.
So it's almost like for your job it's beneficial, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, kind of, right? I think to a certain level, it's healthy, but I think I can admit that the depths in which I go into this darkness is unhealthy,
mm,
right? Because I mean, because my job, a lot of it is statistics, right? We look at the statistical possibilities of certain things, and we plan based on that. So we would never plan for a company going under because a volcano suddenly pops up next to their office, and
right,
like
right.
like that's a 0% chance. I mean, there might be like a 0.001% chance of that happening, but
Mm,
it's just statistically insignificant. So we ignore just crazy situations like that. But personally, I think I go to those really crazy. Like it would never happen, but the fact that there's a inkling of a possibility means that for me, for whatever reason, for whatever, because of the way that my mind is wired, like I have to explore that possibility, and kind of doing it in a unfettered way. It like I kind of get lost in it. Yeah.
mm. So, okay, if you don't have to answer if you don't
Mhm.
feel comfortable.
Yeah. Open book today.
I'm just curious, like, so have you gotten to a point in your counseling where you've been able to find the root to some of why your mind goes to these places?
Yeah. So I think it has a lot to do with I for whatever I think I know I kind of know the reason. I need to be of value to others to believe that they would value me.
Mm,
Meaning, for example, um, like like when we first met, I think if I were like pre-therapy David, I would need to like prove to you that there's a value to me. Like, and actually, honestly, I think I did do that. When we first met, it was through Servants Network, and we were trying to build this thing together. And so I think if I didn't have anything to bring to the table, like I wouldn't have been there. Like I don't think I would have considered my presence enough to befriend people like you. So I have this thing where I need to ensure that I can provide value and show that I can provide value.
mm,
And because of that, I go to these dark places because I have to think about, well, in this aspect, I'm not providing value. In this aspect, I'm not providing value either. But maybe in this aspect, like I'm having to explore all of these scenarios to
mhm,
try to figure out if I can provide value. You know
mm,
what I mean?
mhm,
So in that exploration, like I'm like going through like and as we're building this relationship, with like you within Service Network, right? I'm building all these relationships with you guys, because I'm constantly aware that I need to provide value. Like I also on the other end need to keep thinking about what can possibly happen that I would no longer be of value to these people. Yeah, because like once that happens, then these people aren't gonna like me anymore. Like they're gonna say, "Well, David's useless. He can be on his way." So like I'm like desperately clinging to this relationship, and I'm thinking the only way that I can maintain this relationship that I enjoy so much is to constantly be in a place positioned where I can say, oh, you need help with this? I can provide that value for you. Or, oh, are you having a bad day? I can provide a joke for you, lighten the mood, like in whatever ways, right? But in order to be prepared in that way, I need to be prepared on the opposite end where I'm thinking, what are the scenarios where they can, and there's a little bit of an imposter syndrome there too, because
Sure.
what are the scenarios where they'll figure out that I'm actually of no value at all? Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So everything you just processed out loud with me and where the anxiety is kind of rooted from.
Mhm.
So you did not know this going into therapy, or you kind of did and were able to process it out loud?
So I knew that I wanted to be of value to people.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that like I had this fear of maybe losing people, like a fear of people like not liking me.
Okay.
But then like all of the little things that connected those things and how that connected to anxiety, because my anxiety was coming from a place of if I lose my job, then I'm not going to be of value to my family. You know, I
Okay.
can't provide for them. Like all those connecting factors, I didn't really know. So all the
Mm.
information was in my head. And I knew like there were inklings of, yeah, maybe I am trying to like prove my worth to people. Like that initial thought was there, but it wasn't until I actually sat down and said, and I really thought through it, where I was able to say, oh, wow, I really do this. I do this thing where I'm constantly trying to prove to people that I can be valuable to them.
Mm.
And I realized how exhausting it was because I recognized that I do that. Um, yeah, yeah.
Man, I mean, you and I, we are both people of faith, and I just feel like as you're talking to, it's like you need to identify the lies
Mm,
in your own life in
mhm,
order to break the strongholds spiritually too, like,
yeah.
and I just find it so, I don't really know the word. I mean, I guess, interesting, but also just convicting. For me,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, like this is real healing that
Mm.
is happening in one's life to get rid of the anxiety and the lies that are rooted so deeply that you can't even really identify unless you have mental help.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, light
Yeah.
bulbs are just going
Yeah.
off for me right now. That's
Yeah.
that's great. That's incredible, David.
Hmm.
I'm
And
really
and
happy for you because again, I think it takes courage to even make those steps
mm,
and get over yourself,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. No, I think the first step really was like it was the best part of it. Being able to admit that I need help, being able to admit to myself I need help, and saying let's go seek help, and then finally seeing that, oh, this is actually going to help, I think was the biggest kind of healing
Right.
factor for me.
Right.
Yeah, because like I explained before, I was in a really like hopeless like headspace
Mm,
where I was thinking there's nothing I can do about this because the anxiety is coming from nowhere. There's no source of it. So
mm.
there's no way I can get rid of it, right? So but kind of getting rid of that lie, right? And getting to a place of, oh, I'm seeking help and this is I can actually see this improving my life. Like that was huge for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So good. Um, so episode 100,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm curious, do you like have a long-term goal for the podcast?
I
I don't know if you've
have
thought about it, but
So I have kind of a really lofty goal, like a dream goal that I don't like. I'm okay if it doesn't happen, and I have a more practical goal.
okay, I want to hear both.
Okay, yeah. So the practical goal is to be able to showcase um, Asian American stories for as long as I can,
Mm,
right? Like that's I'm honestly I can say I'm satisfied with that. Like I don't even need monetary gains. Like I just want to be able to put our story out there, and um, even with listener count, yeah, I mean I get around 100 listens per episode these days, what is it 100? So the most recent ones, not everyone has listened. So it fluctuates from like 100 to like 150.
Hmm, hmm.
And I mean, it's not great, but I think I'm okay with it. I think, yeah, I mean, like you were saying, like even you are having conversations in your own household. Yeah, like, if being able to spark people's like dialogue that they have with other people and getting our stories out there, and just the fact that it's out there also, I'm satisfied with, because it's not like if you miss it you're never going to be able to hear it. It's out there, so anyone who wants to go back and listen to past episodes, they can listen. So yeah, like listener count, I don't really have any goals there. I just want to be able to maintain this on a weekly basis.
Mm.
So that would be the goal, right? I mean, and if I had to put like a date to it, I think I will be. I think I'll be satisfied if I get to a episode like 500. I think like if I got there, I think I'd be like, okay, maybe I can stop. Because like if you think about it, that's like 10 years worth of podcast. If you go at a weekly
That's
level,
crazy to
yeah,
think about.
yeah.
See you on podcast 500, David.
If I get there, I'll definitely ask you back to do the same
Yes.
thing. um, yeah, so that's kind of the practical goal, and I think I don't think it's completely unreasonable to do that. But my really like high up there lofty goal is to be able to make enough money from the podcast to not have to work at my
Mm.
job. Um, yeah, and that's that is really tied to listenership. So like I would have to like increase my listenership by a lot, things like that. But yeah, those are kind of the two goals I have. I'm probably gonna try to aim for somewhere in the middle. um but yeah.
Yeah, man, that's the dream, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Uh,
gosh. Yeah, no, I feel like for sure episode 500 is definitely doable. I don't think you would stop there though, because like, your kid will be grown
oh
and then
yeah,
you'll have more time to do
yeah.
this. Or at least that's what I think to
Right,
myself.
yeah.
Like Eli and Zoe will be more older, and then I will have more time to tell people stories as well. So
Mm.
yeah, definitely. I mean, oh, so okay. Also, like I wanted to know how much time actually goes into um making your podcast, from the interview to
Mm.
editing to all of it.
Yeah, so recording it takes like an hour, maybe hour 30. And in terms of editing, I don't really do a ton. So I would say maybe 2 hours per episode.
Mm.
Yeah,
Do you
mine.
listen to the whole thing?
No, I don't.
Okay, okay.
So I skip around just to kind of do like a quality check.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, but I typically don't, unless there's a reason to, unless like I want to like remind myself of something that happened somewhere. I typically don't listen. So yeah, and my like social media isn't as professional as the When I Grow Up podcast, so
Yeah.
it doesn't take me that. I imagine it takes you much longer, right?
For what?
For your episodes, like preparing and editing and all that.
Uh, I mean, honestly, if I'm honest, like I just show up for the interview, and then David, my David,
Hmm.
my husband, does the rest. But like he doesn't mind. So like, if I guess if I were editing it, I would remember like where and when, like if there was like some sort of sound issue
Mm.
or something happened and I wanted to edit out or something, which rarely happens. It's usually a sound issue, like the sound dropped or there's like clinking in one area, and he'll redo that part. But um he listens to the whole thing. I think one, because he wants to hear it,
Yeah.
and then two is for like I can't always remember where like this. I should just write it down, but I don't. Sorry, honey. But
Hey,
um
best husband ever.
yeah, best husband. But like okay, so I don't know why you don't listen to it, maybe because of time, but for me, I don't really listen afterwards because I hate hearing myself.
I will say this. I was that way as well. For the first maybe year,
Uh-huh.
recording. I just didn't like my voice. But I don't know what happened, but there was a moment where it kind of switched and I stopped minding my voice.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
yeah. So I don't know, maybe you'll get there too. But
Yeah.
yeah, for me, I don't listen mostly because of time. Like,
Okay, okay.
yeah, I mean, with a kid and everything,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, you used to meet your guests in person,
Mm,
and I never did that, right? Mine has been virtual for the last episode, like, the whole entire time.
mm.
So has it been different for you? I feel like it would be different.
It's very different. It's yeah. The one thing I don't like about virtually doing these is the conversational aspect of it gets lost a little bit. So, for us, it's okay because we have good internet connections. But some people, when they don't have good internet, there's a lag between when
Yes.
I say something. When yeah, right, exactly. So the whole like like we're talking and then there's a little bit of like overlap of speech because like we're trying to like discuss something like that can happen in real life when you're recording together and that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mess up the sound or anything like that because it's natural conversation. But when you do that on Zoom, it sounds really weird. Like you're talking and they're saying something else, and like it doesn't line up. So when I do Zoom conversations like this, I'm very careful not to have that like talking over each other thing happen. Like when someone starts talking, I immediately like stop talking and let them finish. You know, so the being able to kind of grow the dialogue and conversation organically, it's a lot harder on Zoom, I think. Yeah.
No, definitely. I definitely can agree and resonate with that. I find myself like just waiting like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to make
exactly.
sure, and I don't want to interrupt. And even um affirming the person as they're talking, like, oh yes,
Hmm.
yes, I understand, or like things like that. If you just listen to the podcast, you don't know that I'm affirming the person by just nodding my head, right? But it's because I don't want to interrupt the
Right.
sound or anything. And like you said, there's a lag sometimes. And most of the times, my guests are so understanding about it. And I'm sure yours are too.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I just was curious about how it was for you because I feel like it would just be more enjoyable. Honestly, if it was in person. I mean, like when I did my episode with on your
Hmm.
podcast, um, it was really a lot of fun because it was just like conversing with my friend.
Yeah.
And this is similar, but you're right, there's like a kind of lost in translation kind of filter because
Yeah.
I think it's virtual.
And the thing I really liked about being able to meet people in person is I record at my house, so I'll invite them over. So a lot of times it was either we had dinner beforehand and then we recorded, or we recorded and then we went out to go get dinner, or like something like it was actual relationship building.
Yes.
But then it's like I feel like I'm missing out on because I've had so many great guests
Mm,
virtually, and it's that aspect of it, being able to grow that relationship further, I feel like has been a real missed opportunity
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm,
it's been really like ashiwa.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
and funny story, when we talk about kind of lag and audio issues, the episode before this with EJ,
Uh-huh.
if you listen to it, the first like 10 minutes of his audio sounds different from like the last like hour, and that happened because there was some internet issues, and I actually had to stop him mid sentence to say, "Hey, can you actually turn on your phone and start recording on your phone and send me the audio after?" Yeah, because I usually do that, but for some reason I didn't do this with EJ. So the beginning portion is recorded on his like AirPod, but then the rest of it I had to like edit it in using the phone audio that he sent me. So.
Oh, but I'm glad that you did that. And usually, I feel like usually people are understanding
Mhm,
because they want to sound fine too,
mhm.
on the audio. But yeah, it's kind of awkward though,
Yeah.
because I've done that before too. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, there is this clanking
Yeah.
sound coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
and it's not gonna work. So like,
Mm.
but yeah, okay. Okay. Well, I'll have to listen for it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
inside information, you
Yeah.
guys, like on podcasting.
Yeah.
Definitely. So David, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or share on this special episode that, I
Mm.
don't know, next time I can come and interview you, man. I'm a busy person. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding, you
Yeah.
guys. But no, but seriously, like, was there anything that you wanted to say or talk about?
Yeah, I think there's one thing,
Yeah.
and in the spirit of being unfiltered today, because I'm probably immediately gonna go back to being filtered once I have other guests. Um, but your podcast also is about giving Asian Americans kind of a model of how to like what careers are out there available for. I mean, not necessarily just for Asian Americans, but to be able to show that, hey, like we have people like us doing these jobs out there, right? So it's really catering to the Asian Americans, right? And like I said with my podcast, I'm trying to showcase the Asian American story and experience. So I mean, recently, I don't know if you've seen on the news, but there have been a lot of things happening to the Asian American community, and it hasn't really been on the news per se. I've been reading up on it through social media and things like
Mhm.
that. Um, but this is going to be a unpopular opinion, but I'm just going to say it because, yeah, I think it's really admirable. Okay, so let me preface it with this. I understand, the BLM movement was super important. I understand the history of slavery and I understand police brutality, all of that. And it's really important to talk about, to keep talking about it, and to keep fighting against it, right? But there has been this thing that I've noticed that Asian Americans say, all of these things are happening to us. But if it's being perpetrated by people of color, it's not because of them. It's not their fault. It's because of white supremacy that this is happening. And I understand, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't study it or anything like that. So I don't know if that's an actual factual thing or not. But the thing that makes me sad is I wonder if we're taking away our ability to really grieve the moment properly. Because as Asian Americans, I think we do have this thing of we got to cater to other people first, right? Like that's kind of part of our culture, like our Confucius background, where we don't, yeah, it's like the collective before the individual, right? So I think the intent is really admirable, and I understand why people are adding that disclaimer. But I wish we had a chance to just say, hey, this thing is happening to us and it really sucks. Like even before like saying other things to protect other people, or to say, well, like this is the like situation, and like the like forget all of that for a second, and I just want to be able to say, man, this it sucks that it's happening to our people. Like I've seen some videos and they're like attacks on elderly people, like, and if that happened to my grandfather or my grandmother, I would just say that sucks. Like I want to be pissed off in this moment. I just want to be mad, and I want to be able to process this before like protecting other people, or saying something to seem politically correct and all of that. So I just, yeah. And again, I did give the disclaimer that this would be an unpopular opinion, but yeah, I just want to verbally give permission to all the Asian Americans listening to this right now to take a moment and just be upset about it, before thinking about other people. And I think that's really important because I when I talked about anxiety with Andy N on my podcast a long time ago, something that he said really stuck with me was, I was explaining to him an experience I had with like my mom, and the way that I was wording everything was like this happened, but it wasn't my mom's fault. My mom was doing everything that she could, but like I was feeling this way. But I totally understand why my mom did this. And then he stopped me and said, hey, like, don't worry about what your mom was going through. Don't try to like understand what the reality of it was. I want you to just explain and walk through and think about your perceived reality. Like what was happening to you? Like not about like we all understand that everyone has their own stories, but in order to process this, I want you to just think about what was happening to you, like how you were feeling. And I think it's a similar situation right now. Like I want us to be able to understand and think about what's happening to us like before trying to look at reality. Let's look at our perceived reality first. What is happening to us? Like how is it making us feel?
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah,
no, I mean, I can see and understand why you would think and believe that it would be an unpopular
opinion.
opinion or topic. But I don't disagree with it myself. You
Mm,
know, I think I haven't looked into it very much. I just know what's coming up on my own social media.
mm,
And I got caught wind of it pretty early on, just because of some of the outlets the feeds that I follow too. And um, that's the first thing that came to my mind too. Like, is like, sure, like, there's a bigger picture,
mm,
but all I could think about too were my grandparents.
mm.
Like, how horrible, like, that people that look like myself are being targeted. Like, and then I thought, because this is happening in the West Coast a lot,
Right.
right? And um, I thought, oh my gosh, I should call my grandparents
Mm,
and just tell them to like really be careful. Because like it was scary,
yeah.
you know, to think about. And just to think about like my grandpa walking down Long Beach and just someone. I mean, I've seen the videos, you know, they're pretty graphic. And
Yeah.
it's like almost like unreal,
Yeah.
like what was caught on video, you know?
Mm,
And yeah, I appreciate your unfiltered opinion, David, because again, it brings up feelings that should be talked about, but maybe people are scared to because they don't, you know, like I was it you that I was talking to this about? Just like this fear of offending people, you know, all the time
mm-hmm.
and just like always thinking about that. I can't remember who I was talking to about it with, um but instead of worrying about that, like
Yeah.
yeah, just being able to experience and really grieve is what you were saying, and I really appreciate that, and thank you for giving those that it might be unpopular, but I think the permission is sometimes needed, you
Yeah.
know. And so that's, yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
um well, David, I really enjoyed this unfiltered you, like
Yeah.
truly. And I think it was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
No,
It was truly an honor.
yeah. So just to give people a little bit of a background story, I first approached Blair and said, "Hey, 100 episodes is coming up. I want to like the initial idea was just to have a podcasters like vent session,
Right, right.
uh, but I really like the idea of you like kind of interviewing me. It was fresh, so thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for preparing, and because this isn't even your podcast, but you like hosted it, as if it were your own. So thank you so
No, it was
much.
my pleasure. I really enjoyed some of the things we got to chat about today. So
Mhm.
thanks again, David. And hey, man, congratulations. I like
Thank you.
seriously, like if you don't, I mean, most people are gonna be like, "Woohoo, big deal, 100 episodes." But for real, I'm your number one cheerleader, and or after Shirley, of course, and I like know how much time and effort, and even just thought that goes to putting these episodes out, you know, week to week. I remember when you got through a year. I feel like in the beginning that was kind of your goal, right? To
Yeah.
like just get through 1 year, and I was
Hmm.
like, man, he did it. He did it. That's crazy. Because, you know, my David challenged me too. Like, because at first I was like, I'll do like bi weekly,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, it's too much. But then he was like, no, man, you got to put them out every week. So it's like, it's a lot to think about, set up guests and stuff. So
Mm.
truly amazing. Congratulations.
Thank
100
you.
episode, guys. And I, you know, on behalf of David, you guys, the listeners, it's all because of you guys, truly.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
David, thanks again for your vulnerability, transparency, and the unfiltered you today. I want to encourage you, to be more unfiltered. No, I'm just kidding. Protect your
No,
guests. Protect your guests.
honestly, this is kind of fun. Not having to being able to just be unfiltered. Maybe I'll think about it.
Like 50%,
Yeah. A
50%
little
of
bit, a
it.
little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know it's your podcast, David, but before we end, I just want I think you'll be okay with it.
Yeah.
But like, um, if you have questions about mental health or mental help getting it, or questions about podcasting, let me tell you, David is your guy. So please feel free to reach out to him through direct message or what's your email
Yeah.
address?
It's IHTHT podcast at gmail.com.
Sweet. So
Yeah.
you guys know how to contact David. Um, he is an open book.
Yes. Usually, I can be.
Sometimes, but
Yeah,
he will be.
I will be. Yes. If you request it, I will be an open book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, David, have a good night.
You too. Thanks, Blair.